Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started shortly. We're just going to allow folks to get in the room and get settled. So we'll get started in another minute. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dingman Creek Stage 2 Environmental Assessment Flood Hazard Public Update Meeting. Now, before we begin, we must acknowledge the lands we are situated on. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Audouanan peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. As representatives of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. All right, let's get started. Let's begin with introductions. My name is Nikki Sasso-Mitchell, and I'm the Communication Specialist with the City of London, and I am here to facilitate today. We also have Adrienne and Amna on the call, and I will turn it over to Adrienne to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adrienne Soanes, Stormwater Engineer with the City of London, and I've been involved in this project since about 2018 for the entirety of the Dingman EA and what's been going on. So happy to share an update with you all today. And with that, I'll pass it over to Amna to do her introduction.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amna Tariq. I'm an engineer with the Stormwater Engineering Division at the City of London as well. I'm new to the city, I've been here for about 2 years and helping Adrian with the Dingman EA component. So with that, we'll dive right in. In terms of the outline for today's presentation, we want to give you an introduction and background, just outlining the study objectives and give you a progress update of the Dingman Creek Stage 2 EA. And then we'll get into the official plan amendment and the upcoming policy and mapping updates that we're anticipating and talk about the updated flood hazard mapping and any future coordination that we foresee. With that, I'll defer it to Adrian to kind of walk us through the initial components of the presentation.
Thanks, Amna. So recognizing that the topic today is the floodplain update, it's important to sort of consider where we've come from to get to this update. The Dingman EA has been going on for quite some time, so I'll just give a bit of a background about the study. So the initial Dingman Creek Stage 1 EA was initiated in 2017 to update the stormwater management strategy for largely the lands in South London. Through the Stage 1 EA process, it was recognized the need to update the Dingman Creek floodline to recognize current provincial flood mapping standards and recognize the flood impacts of future development. At that time, the city and the UTRCA could not agree on the floodplain update as part of the Stage 1 EA. As a result, the UTRCA established a screening area to sort of as a placeholder for that future update, and the city finalized the Dingman Stage 1 EA with a stormwater strategy for lands that were not impacted by the screening area. That brings us to the second stage of the Dingman Creek Environmental Assessment, which was initiated in 2021. A significant objective of this study is to update the Dingman Creek floodplain and also identify municipally led works to mitigate or alleviate flooding associated with the floodplain update. Combining the floodplain update into a municipally led process is beneficial as it allows for future mitigation works and policy updates to be included as part of the overall study. So where we are in terms of the Dingman Stage 2 EA process, as I mentioned in the previous slide, that the study was initiated in 2021. In both 2023 and 2024, we had proposed updated floodplain mapping and hosted 2 separate public meetings to share that information. Through the last year, we've worked with our colleagues at Upper Thames River Conservation Authority to finalize what we see as the existing conditions flood hazard mapping. And so through the Dingman EA stage process, we're proposing to do an official plan amendment to update the floodplain mapping, which then reflects as a flood hazard update. And I'll get into some of the technical jargon in the next slides. So currently we're sort of in the middle of the Dingman EA process. And then through the next year, we intend to finalize the mitigation strategy. So that would be municipally led projects that would mitigate potentially some areas of floodplain within the Dingman Creek watershed. And we intend to finalize that study at the end of 2026. So in terms of some of the language we use around this, just this slide sort of gives a bit of background in terms of the terminology. And so what we have, in order to establish a flood line, we complete modeling analysis to determine where that flood limit is. So the flood line is really the output from the modeling that gives us these results. So in the City of London, where UTRCA is the Conservation Authority having jurisdiction, the flood event that we use to define the floodplain in these areas is the 250-year storm event. So that's what event we're using throughout this study. So the modeling results give us where the expected lands that would be flooded during a 250-year storm event, and that's what we're speaking to today. In terms of probability, there's a 0.4% chance that that event could happen in a year. So it's not a frequent event, but we're looking at worst case scenarios so that in the future, when we're developing lands or looking at land use, we have a consideration for where flooding may occur and ensure that we're developing lands in appropriate locations. So what happens after we get the flood line? We then do post-processing to determine what the flood hazard limit is. So this is really the line that we're moving forward with today, is this flood hazard. So it takes the modeling results. Anywhere where a building is touching that flood line, the entire envelope of the building footprint gets brought into the flood hazard. And the flood hazard lands also include highlands that are not in the floodplain itself, but they're surrounded by floodwaters during that 250-year event, where access may be an issue and need to be considered as part of a future development process. And with all of that, once there is a flood hazard is established, then the Conservation Authority incorporates that into their regulation limit. So their regulation limit includes wetlands, flood hazard, and erosion hazards, as well as an additional 15 to 30 meter setback. So the image we have on the left just sort of shows you the different levels of information that's used to develop that flood hazard limit. So where we are, so right now we're looking at updating the flood hazard as part of the official plan amendment. So the mapping for this update was posted online back in December. Through the month of January, we're having a few public engagement opportunities to receive feedback and have communication with the public on this ongoing update. We're proceeding to the Planning and Environment Committee, and then that will eventually go to Council in March. And then once the city has gone through the process of updating the flood hazard line or the floodplain line within our official plan, then UTRCA will proceed to accept that line through their own processes. In terms of the official plan amendment, what we're proposing to change is that there'll be change to some of the language in the London Plan policies. Will we also be updating the place type map within map 1 of the London Plan and the flood hazard limit shown within map 6 of the London Plan. I'll pass it over to Amna.
Thanks, Adrian. So there's a lot of coordination that went into undertaking this flood hazard update. So internally within the city, the Stormwater Engineering Division and our planning teams work together, and also externally with the Upper Thames Region Conservation Authority, ensuring that we all agreed on the modeling approach and all the technical aspects that went into delineating the flood hazard. And UTRCA also led some of the post-processing, similar to what Adrian was talking about, like the city's consultant developed the modeling, which gives you the raw flood line, which then was provided to UTRCA to do the post-processing and develop the flood hazard limit, which we're talking about today. And we've also gone through a peer review where a lot of good recommendations were made, which are being implemented in the work. But more or less, we wanted to make sure all agencies are using the same flood hazard limit moving forward that meet both the Conservation Authority Act as well as the Provincial Planning Act. So in terms of the updated mapping, as Adrian indicated, that was posted online before the holidays. I hope everyone had a chance to review that. But ultimately, what we're presenting is the flood hazard limit associated with the 250-year storm. The dark blue line kind of gives you the outline of the flood hazard, and flood hazard is also filled in with the light blue. And as Adrian also mentioned earlier, we wanted to show the high ground areas within the floodplain, which is basically areas that will not have dry access. One of the key things we wanted to point out again is that this is the flood hazard limit, which is one component of the regulatory limit that's set by the conservation authorities, which would include additional hazards like erosion and wetland setbacks. But key note here is the 250-year design storm. It has a low probability, but higher impacts from a flood hazard perspective. We did want to give you guys a bit of an update on the rigorous modeling efforts that went into this assessment. There's 3 sets of models which use a lot of latest information and technology. And we went above and beyond to not just look at 1D modeling, but also 2D modeling. From a public aspect, I wanted to give you a simple analogy of what does it mean when we say 1D versus 2D and steady state versus unsteady state. So if we wanted to think about tracking traffic in just one lane of a highway, you know how fast the cars are moving, how many are passing by, but you only know that along that one lane that we're monitoring. You don't see cars changing lanes, taking exits, or backing up onto side roads. Now imagine drone footage of the entire interchange. You see traffic moving in all directions, changing lanes, taking ramps, slowing down, or spilling onto local roads. And you can watch how that changes over time. So let's bring that analogy to this floodplain mapping. When we talk about 1D modeling, we're talking about monitoring that one highway lane. It tells us the water level in the river at one time. While the 2D model is like the drone footage showing how the flood waters actually spread into streets, neighborhoods, and low-lying area. And if we only look at one lane, we might miss where the real congestion's coming from. So in all of that, we wanted to ensure that we were using the best information possible with the latest technology to develop this updated flood hazard limit. So we've looked at a series of models to kind of delineate those limits to ensure that we're using the best data possible. In terms of future coordination, we do foresee ongoing updates to the flood hazard limit through development applications and municipal projects. So it'll be like a living floodline, all the more to recognize that there is future mitigation works that the city plans to undertake, and those scenarios we're planning to model over this year. So stay tuned for that refinement in the efforts to improve flooded areas that we currently have. The city is also looking to update the zoning layer that will be through the Rethink London project to reflect the changes to the underlying zoning areas with this updated floodline. So we've posted a link on the presentation, which will be shared with you. Please check it out and reach out to us if you have any questions. So that kind of that concludes our presentation. I'll circle it back to Nikki to kind of take us through the next components before we start the Q&A session.
Okay, thank you so much, Emma and Adrian. If you'd like to receive email notifications about this project, please sign up to the Dingman Creek Get Involved page. This QR code that's right here on the slide, you can use your phones to go directly to the website. If you would like to email the project team, the email address is also listed right there. All right, are there any questions for today? You can type your question and answers into the Q&A little chat button there.
And I guess just for any attendees who aren't aware, we didn't introduce the other panelists when we started, but we also have colleagues from UTRCA in attendance if there's any specific questions that they might be able to answer. And then we also have Justin Adema from our long range planning and policy group who can speak to sort of the planning piece and any of the zoning questions you may have.
Okay, some questions are coming in. Where can we get a map detailing the impact to our own property?
So the mapping is on the Get Involved website. There is a link, I think it's the second live link down on the web page. You can scroll to and it provides a GIS web-based interactive mapping that you can zoom in, and the property fabric is shown on that map.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Can the flood area be changed through bringing in fill?
That's a great question. As part of this process, we're also creating a cut fill balance implementation guide. The intention is that this would be used in greenfield development areas to help facilitate future development where we could do slight modification along the outer limits of the flood line, where we've got in Dingman recognizing that it's a really flat floodplain once you extend beyond the banks of the channel, the creek itself, and where you've got low-lying areas, there would be opportunity to do some fill, given that there's an equal balance or more cut done, so that we're maintaining the overall storage volume within the floodplain. And all of that would be subject to approvals by both the city and UTRCA through the various processes.
Okay, thank you. Does this modeling include any features or consideration for constructed stormwater management facilities within the watershed?
At this time, we have recognized a number of stormwater ponds in the upstream areas where there was flooding impacts to existing developments in the downstream lands. The current technical guidance from the province doesn't allow for stormwater ponds to be recognized in floodplain mapping. So moving forward on a case-by-case basis where there's a smaller tributary downstream, that may be something that we'd be looking to include, meeting specific requirements that the city and UTRCA would agree to on that.
Okay, thank you. What happens to property values to those who have property and buildings that were outside of the floodplain that move into it?
That's a great question. It really depends. It's a site-by-site basis, what the impacts would be, what the current land use is or proposed land use. So we can't really speak at a high level to individual properties. But if you did have a question about a site that you'd like to discuss in more detail with the city, you're welcome to reach out and we can set up a time to discuss that individually.
Okay. Will you be consulting with surrounding First Nations?
Yes, we will. So as the part of the EA process, we go through the regular engagement processes with our local First Nation communities who've been invited to attend this meeting today, and we'll continue to receive update notifications about the EA and its process.
Perfect. Oh, somebody's just asking if they can access the recording of this presentation. And yes, you can. At that Get Involved web link that's right here. We'll be posting this later on by the end of the week at the latest. Are you proposing no development in the 250-year storm, or is development allowed outside of the 100-year storm?
That's a great question. So in other jurisdictions in Ontario, or sometimes through other planning processes, they may use both modeling the 100-year and the regulatory event to delineate between where development can occur. At this time, this isn't something we're proposing for this area. But again, it comes down to a site-by-site basis and what might be appropriate. But that's not something that we've considered at this time.
Okay, thank you. What is the division of responsibility between the city and the Conservation Authority?
Right. So under both the Provincial Planning Act and the Conservation Authorities Act, both the city and Conservation Authority have an interest in the floodplain and ensuring and facilitating development, safe and proper development in these areas. And that's really where there's not necessarily a division of responsibility, but the intent is that there would be one floodplain that would be adopted through this process that would meet the requirements of both those acts and allow both entities to fulfill their requirements, their legislative requirements.
Okay, thank you. By provincial standards, do you mean the 2002 guideline?
Yes, so there is a 2002 technical floodplain regulatory floodplain mapping guideline that was published by the Ministry of Natural Resources, and that's the current most updated tech guidance that we have to work with within the province of Ontario.
Okay, great. With the provincial government wanting to create super CAs, I'm not really sure what that is, are development proposals possibly going to change?
I think we'll let Jenna answer this one, if she could.
Sure. So currently, the provincial government has proposed the amalgamation of the 36 conservation authorities into 7 regional conservation authorities. And there's very few details at this point about what that would mean, although the province has indicated that there is to be no change to conservation authorities' mandatory roles and responsibilities. So we anticipate that we will continue to deliver the same services that conservation authorities have always delivered, including reviewing and approving development proposals within regulated areas. So we don't expect that role will change, regardless of whether we remain as the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority or whether we are consolidated with other conservation authorities.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. Will the tax valuation change if your land is now included in the floodlines?
That's not a question I have the answer to. I think that's something we'll have to take back and can respond offline for that. We just don't have anybody, an expert in tax evaluation, present at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. What department should we contact regarding decrease in property values and whether the city will assist with compensation?
Again, that's not something that we're familiar with, and we'll have to get a response on that one.
Okay. What is the ultimate goal of the environmental assessment?
Ultimate goal of the environmental assessment is to provide the floodplain update, as well as identify future works that this future municipally led infrastructure works like culvert upsizing or improved channel conveyance that would help alleviate some of the flooding issues within the city.
Okay, and is upstream development a leading cause to the expansion of the floodlines?
I'll take my best crack at answering this one, but given that the historical floodline was created, my best guess is sometime in the 80s, and it hasn't really been updated since then. Our update does include more development lands than what we expect the previous iteration of the floodplain included, and that's the guidance given by the 2002 tech guide is to recognize the future development conditions within the subwatershed.
Will this change in the floodline affect our ability to draw water from Dingman Creek for irrigation purposes?
I'm not familiar with the processes and requirements for irrigation, but I wouldn't expect that there should have any impact on that.
Okay. Are there any other questions? What will the new zoning be for areas in floodlines?
We'll defer to Justin Adema from the Long Range Planning Group to speak to this question, if he could, please.
Thanks, Adrian. So following the update to the floodline, we will have to update our official plan delineation of the floodline as well. And part of that will then be to review the applicable place types. So in some of these areas, there may be a development place type that applies, but as a result of being added to the floodplain area, the place type would be amended to most likely a green space place type. So then the zoning would be updated to align with that, and it would restrict development based on what's permitted, both in our official plan as well as based on provincial policy.
Great, thank you, Justin. It's been years since the creek was cleaned out in some areas. Are there any intentions of doing so?
I think this is, it really depends on it's a site-by-site basis. A portion of Dingman Creek is part of the municipal, registered under the Municipal Drainage Act. And so without really knowing which specific area of Dingman Creek you're referring to, we can't provide any response to this question. But if you wanted to reach out and indicate a specific area that you'd like to discuss, we're certainly open to having that conversation.
Okay, are there any other questions from anyone attending today? Will this restrict expansion of existing agriculture operations in the area?
To that, we don't expect there to be any change to current land use practices within the Dingman Creek subwatershed as a result of the floodplain update.
The 2003 Stormwater Management Planning and Design Manual was implemented in an effort to offset impacts to downstream lands. However, by using the 2002 guideline, the impact of development therefore does not expand the downstream floodplain. Can you speak to what consideration was given on this matter?
Certainly, we sort of spoke to this before, that we did include stormwater ponds to recognizing the attenuation they provide up into the 100-year event in certain instances where we thought that it was going to reduce the flood impacts to existing built-out properties downstream. We recognize that through future development applications, and as we sort of refine the flood hazard limit with UTRCA, this is something that we're going to have to develop our own approach for what would be appropriate, because there is a bit of a disconnect between the provincial guidance on floodplain regulation and how floodplains are delineated versus stormwater management practices and the requirement to provide that flood control storage. I will say, I think something that is to keep in mind is that this floodplain, it's a bit different than other floodplain updates that we've done in the past, because in the past, the London plan language didn't allow for any development or change of the floodplain. And with Dingman Creek, we'll have special provisions that allows for modification of the floodplain to sort of help facilitate development and land use in an appropriate way through that cut fill guidance and things that we were speaking to there. And so we sort of view this as the city recognizes we're going to have to undertake regular updates to the floodplain to recognize these changes that we see occurring within the watershed in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Adrian. Is there any intention to set aside money to compensate owners for reduction in property values? I think you already spoke on this.
Yeah, and this isn't something that would be addressed through the EA process.
Yeah. Will we be allowed to control erosion of our property, or will approvals have to be through a cons authority?
It really speaks to the individual site conditions and whether you're within the regulated area or not. So if your property is within the regulated area, then you would have to proceed with an application to the Conservation Authority for any works within that area. As for erosion control, that without having more information on what that would look like, I can't really speak to the specific example.
Somebody's asking about a livestock facility could be built on lands that are now included in the floodplain. Floodplain?
I think I would refer either to if there's someone from UTRCA who could take this question, or Justin. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I can speak from the UTRCA's perspective. When it comes to development in the floodplain for a new livestock facility, there will be certain prohibitions or restrictions that would be applied as a result of the floodplain. So again, it really depends on the site-specific circumstances. So the existing uses would be allowed to continue, and there may be opportunities for expansions. But ultimately, we would have to be satisfied that that new facility is not going to aggravate existing hazards or create new hazards. So again, it's not an outright easy answer other than aside from it's site specific, but there are opportunities for some limited expansion of existing uses.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any plans that might include control of beavers and that are currently flooding areas of the upstream floodplain?
Right. So as part of this floodplain model, beavers activity and any existing beaver dams isn't captured in the modeling. And so it wouldn't be included as part of this process.
There's another question about erosion control. If there's any money set aside by the Conservation Authority for erosion control.
That's something Joe or Jenna might be able to speak to.
I think we need to know the specifics. We do have stewardship opportunities through the conservation authorities to access funding for certain types of agricultural projects that may include erosion control projects. But again, we need to know site specifically what you're interested in and whether it meets the criteria of some of our funding opportunities.
Thank you, Jenna. Is there a way of seeing the original map to compare it with the updated map?
Yep. That is online. The link that Adrian was kind of speaking to, like there's two links. There's a map from November 8th, 2024, which was from the previous consultation. And then there's the December 4th, 2025 from the current consultation. And that also includes the existing floodline that we have in our official plan, which Adrian kind of alluded to is from the 80s. So all of that is there on a map for you to toggle back and forth and compare where things have changed.
Great, thank you, Amna. Is the dryland storage and Dingman Creek rerouting still going ahead at the corner of White Oaks and Dingman?
Yes, that's speaking to one of the mitigation strategies that's been identified through the EA, and that's still the intention for the development of those lands to address the flood development with or floodplain within their site.
Okay. Are there any other questions from anybody on the call? We have a couple more coming in here. How many acres of prime farmland will be removed to put that measure in place?
So I'm assuming this is still speaking to the site at White Oaks Road and Dingman Road. Those lands they're within the urban growth boundary, and so they've always been anticipated for future urban development.
Is there any intention of increasing the size of bridges over Dingman Drive near Wonderland?
That is something we are aware of, and that will be part of we expect that to be a part of the mitigation strategy for Dingman Creek, but wouldn't be implemented until future widening of Dingman Drive.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I see Mark has his hand up. Are you able to type your question into the chat at all, Mark?
I think I've received an email from Mark, and he's got a number of questions here. Do you want me to send these to you, Nikki?
Oh, sure.
Out?
Oh, we have another question here. Will Veteran Memorial Parkway be extended south, and will the floodplain affect the route?
That's not something that we've considered as part of this study, as we were really focusing on development lands within South London, but that's certainly something we can take back and verify.
Thank you. What is the overall grade of the health of Dingman Creek?
I don't know if someone from UTRCA would like to speak to the watershed report cards that would track the health of Dingman Creek.
Sure, I can certainly try and answer that. I'm not part of our watershed report card team, but our latest watershed report cards are from 2002, so we update them every 5 years. So we are in the process of updating our report cards, but the 2002 report card indicated that a surface water quality grade of a D was the rating for Dingman Creek, and forest conditions were also provided with a D for the Dingman Creek subwatershed.
Okay, thank you. Did you want me to read out the questions that are in this email, Adrian?
Sure. Try to answer those.
What has changed since the last public meeting, and the flood area has dramatically increased from the last in-person public meeting?
Yeah, I think the big thing for this is that the flood line that we were showing last time was before it was post-processed, and so it didn't bring in buildings, and as well the high ground areas weren't included in the flood hazard area, which are now included. So I know when you look at it at a large scale, it's really important to take into consideration those what we call the islands that are high ground, that actually they're not within the floodplain, but there could be restricted access to those sites that needs to be considered. The other piece of it is the previous mapping that we showed included the high hazard, low hazard approach, whereas this floodplain update, we only have the one zone, so everything's mapped looking as the same color. And I know that that can kind of skew the visual representation of that floodplain.
Okay, thank you. It says, what timeline is the flood level based on? I think you already answered this.
So it is the 250-year event.
250-year, okay.
Yeah.
How much of the increased chance of flooding is caused by upstream development?
We don't have a way to quantify the changes if it's due to upstream development or just changes in grading or other changes in the modeling. We haven't taken that into consideration as part of the process.
Has there been any consideration to the fact that there's significant reduction in permeable land that increases flow into drainage systems instead of percolating through naturally? So paving of natural lands.
So the modeling accounts for future development lands that are anticipated within the next 30 years. And it doesn't look at development of the entire subwatershed to define where the flood lines are.
And this is another question about compensation to landowners. And I think we've already chatted about that. And why do downstream landowners have to bear the burden of increased risk flooding caused by upstream development?
So it's upstream development is the only reason that the floodplain is changing. It's really an update in technology and the tools we have available to define where these flood limits lie, and isn't really related to necessarily correlated only to upstream development. But there's a few reasons why the floodplain is changing.
Some areas of the new ponds that were created on Dingman Drive are being taken over by cottonwood. Are there any plans to control the growth of these trees? Because in my opinion, they are invasive.
Fortunately, we don't have anybody from forestry on the call to speak to the forestry management plan in this area, and I don't have an answer for that.
The land on the southwest corner of White Oak and Dingman is not in the urban growth boundary, to my understanding. So will this be brought into the urban growth boundary?
I believe that area is within, sorry, the south.
West corner.
Yeah, Justin, if you could answer that one.
Yeah, sorry, I was just pulling up the map to look at that area, and it looked like it is outside of the urban growth boundary currently. So there wouldn't be any changes proposed as part of this review. We did actually just recently update the urban growth boundary, and that was approved by council in December. So that's now with the province to review. So there's no anticipated changes to the urban growth boundary in the near future once those are in place, and those did not incorporate these lands from what I can see here.
Okay, and another question here, why isn't upstream development taken into account in the modeling?
I think this question probably requires some clarification. So the current updated flood hazard limit includes all existing development to date and also some future development within the urban growth boundary. So it is included, but it's not separated between the 80s floodplain that we had and the current one. So the one that we have now includes all development plus future development that's anticipated.
Can additional modeling be completed to establish the extent of the floodline mapping, which is attributed to development?
That's not something that would be considered as part of this study and the floodplain update.
Okay, are there any other? Oh, there's another one. Will the city be removing prime farmland for the dry land storage facility?
That, I think this is referring back to a previous mitigation strategy where we wanted to look at including more storage within the floodplain along the main Dingman Creek Channel corridor. Through the modeling, it was determined that that wasn't the preferred alternative. And the primary focus of most of our mitigation strategy is actually culvert upsizing and conveyance, increasing channel conveyance. And we don't expect to be constructing any storage facilities to mitigate flooding within Dingman Creek.
Okay. Any other questions?
I can do my best to answer this question, but it really it's a parks related concern. I know at the time of when they were Dingman Erosion Control Facility, the wetland just off of the 402 and Wonderland Road was constructed. There was an intent in the future that they could build parking because it is a spot that many birders like to visit because it has become a really good habitat. My understanding is that because of the location, that it's too far outside of the city urban area at this point, that there isn't an intention to formalize that parking until there's more development within the area. So it's something that is a future consideration, but we're just not there yet.
Thanks, Adrian. And that was just the question was, will future stormwater ponds have enough parking in the plan?
And I think that goes back to the previous comment that we made that we don't expect to have future stormwater controls as part of the mitigation strategy for Dingman Creek to attenuate flooding. So we're not proposing any more facilities like the Dingman erosion control facility at this time.
Okay. And again, the presentation will be, this was recorded, so we will be posting this on the Dingman Creek Get Involved page. And again, any questions can be sent to the email that's here on your screen. I'm just waiting if there's any other questions from anybody. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you for joining us today. As I said, the presentation will be posted, and we do appreciate you all taking the time to join us on the call today and for asking all of your questions. And we wish you a good rest of your day. And thank you so much. And thank you to all of the panelists for joining us and answering all of the questions as well. And if you do have a question, because I see some hands up, could you please write it into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. And the Q&A button is just on the lower part there of your screen. And you can also send any questions into the email address that we had up on the screen earlier as well. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to say goodbye then to everybody. Thank you so much again for joining us today.